Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the Turbo 360 tutorial series on setting up a blog website for your personal blog. In the previous video, we continued setting up the global configuration JSON file so that this data over here can be rendered from that JSON file, the global.json. However, we didn't finish the entire thing. You may notice that we still have to take care of the picture as well as the social media icons. So we have a few more things to configure there. And then we also need to hook up this email capture form so that when somebody enters the email and subscribes to your newsletter, it actually goes to a backend. The data persists. One more thing worth pointing out is that on one of the examples I showed earlier, this one right here, you may have noticed that this little pop-up shows up where you can configure this data without doing any actual code, which makes things a lot easier when you want to make small changes, or more importantly, if you have a client who wants to make changes. So we're going to actually have this show up on our project as well. So that'll be taken care of today as well. So let's get into it. I'm going to fire up the terminal and run the dev server. I am in the root directory of the project, so turbo dev server. And once that fires up, reload this, make sure everything still works, and which it does. So then here I am in the code, and we have the home JSON, which is what this obviously is, and the sidebar partial right here, which is what's rendering most of that global data. So let's finish up this part right here. I'm going to continue configuring the social media icons from the global JSON configuration file. So what that means is this section right here, which is where all the social media icons are, should be configured from this global JSON right here, which doesn't really have that much right now, but we're going to fill it out a little bit more. So we have a handful of social media icons right here. I'm just going to space these out. And each one of these obviously represents one network. So Twitter, LinkedIn, GitHub, Stack Overflow, CodePen. I don't know if a lot of people use. I'm going to try some of these other ones like YouTube, or maybe what I'll do is I'll just add YouTube like so. YouTube. And then we'll also do Instagram. Okay. I'm going to take CodePen out. I don't think a lot of people really use that. And yeah, same as Stack Overflow. I'm going to remove those two and just basically swap in YouTube and Instagram instead. Not a big thing, just a minor adjustment. Now, what we want to do is go back to our global JSON, which will contain these social media icons. And I'm going to create a new entry called social. And that's going to be a JSON object, which is going to contain an entry for each one of these. So Twitter, LinkedIn, GitHub, YouTube, and Instagram. Actually, let me see what this, if I remove this alt file. Yeah, that's fine. And then if I remove this, yeah, okay. So you'll see why I did that in a second. So Twitter, LinkedIn, GitHub, YouTube, Instagram. So let's do that. So each one of these is going to be its own JSON object. Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, GitHub. Instagram, YouTube, GitHub, LinkedIn. Should probably add one for Facebook too, actually. It's probably the first one that should be on here. So Facebook. And I'm going to add another entry over here for Facebook. Okay, and then Let's make sure that properly shows up. Okay, so first things first. Certain users might not have all of these networks. In fact, it's pretty unlikely that somebody will have all of these. So I'm going to add a Boolean called show or hide, and that's going to be defaulted to true. And we're going to use this Boolean to determine whether or not that particular social media link should even show up. So the way you do that is you go here and we do global because it's in the global object, and then the global has now a social key, so social, and this first one over here is Facebook. So Facebook, and then show or hide. And to indicate a conditional inside the mustache templating engine, we do a hashtag here, and then we do a sort of a closing tag here. And this basically means if this Boolean right here is set to true, render this HTML. Otherwise, if it's set to false, hide that chunk of code. So we can basically do that for all of these. And then don't forget the closing tags. And you can think of these as essentially if statements inside the mustache templating engine. It's not exactly what they are, but it kind of works like an if statement. Don't forget to change this right here, and then LinkedIn, and then GitHub, and then YouTube, and of course Instagram is last but not least. Okay, so now if we reload the page, everything should still show up the same. But let's say we go back to our global JSON, and let's say the user doesn't have a Facebook, Twitter, and a YouTube. These are set to false. Then when I reload, when I reload the browser, I only see what's left as set to true. So we can use that to determine what even shows up. So that's pretty convenient, and it'll be even more convenient when we actually deploy it to the staging environment. So the next thing we want to do is we want to add a link, another property called URL. And this should link to the actual page of that social media network in particular. So, and then the username, whatever the username is, right? So let's go ahead and finish out each one of these. Instagram, YouTube. Obviously your GitHub profile should go here, and LinkedIn. So now we can access the URL key for each social network inside the mustache templating. So here it should be right here. It should say, oops, let's go to the first one, Facebook. So global, and this should be, it's actually 3 curly braces here. Technically it'll be fine if you just do 2, but generally when you have like a URL string, you want to do 3. And then same thing with the Twitter one. 1, 2, 3. Twitter. LinkedIn. GitHub. YouTube. And Instagram. And then we want to generally show these in a separate tab because we don't want to have users navigate away from the site. So I'm going to do a target blank right here for that exact reason. Okay, then that should take care of that. So let's reload the page, and let's go ahead and click on one of these, and that goes to Twitter, and this goes to LinkedIn, so forth and so on. So these should go to your respective page for those networks. That's the idea here. And for now, that should be good to go. Now what we want to do is we want to do turbo page global, because don't forget we made a change to the global page, the global JSON configuration file. So don't forget to do that. And then we want to do a turbo deploy. However, before we do that, I'm going to add go to the home page and add a JavaScript file here that will give us the functionality that will have that pop-up editor show up over here. And you can grab that link inside the description section of this YouTube video. So here is the JavaScript library. This library right here essentially just does that. It gives you that editing module that allows you to edit pages and configuration files on the page rather than going into the code every time. So if I go to the home mustache and I just drop that here, right here as a script tag, and then the src is that right there. And again, this will be linked in the description section of this video, as well as the first comment in this video as well. So you can just grab it from the actual YouTube video where you're watching this. And this again will give us that editing module. So now when I deploy, assuming that works, then on the staging deployment, I will have that editing module where I can change these configuration files on the site rather than doing it through the code every time. And again, just to reiterate, it makes it very convenient for you to make small changes so you don't have to open up your code every single time. The sudo issue from last time, I'll take care of that. So you may recall in the last video we had some access errors when deploying. And if you recall, whenever that happens, you just want to run the operation as sudo, the root administrator, right here, and that should take care of that problem. So let's try that again. So sudo turbo deploy, and hopefully this time it'll be a smooth run. There we go, got it right that time. And so yeah, going back to my point, it'll make it very easy for you to make small changes on your blog or your site, but equally important, it makes it very easy if you want to work with somebody else, for example, a client who might not be technical. And that'll make it easy for your clients to make changes on their site without having to call you over and over again. So it's really a tool that we developed to make it easier for you to collaborate with other people, especially non-technical people on projects like this, using a Node Express environment if you don't want to use something like WordPress or something like that, like PHP. Okay, so this is done. Excuse me. Let's check this staging deployment and see if everything works. And now look at what we have here. See, we can now edit the page by using this module. So now I have all the social media icons still showing up, right? And it's too many, right? So we go into the global configuration, which is the global JSON object, click on social, and we have our social media entries. Let's say we want to remove the YouTube and the Instagram. Let's say we don't have those, and that's it. And then I press apply changes, and then that should update with the changes directly applied right here. So now we only have what I left behind, and that's it. So now we can update pretty much the rest of the site this way as well. So this is my blog website. Welcome to my blog, and then apply the change, and then we're good to go. And that makes life a lot easier than opening up the code and making these changes every single time. Also worth pointing out is that this module right here only shows up if you are logged in. So obviously other people won't have access to that. So to demonstrate that, if I open up this link in another browser like Safari, where I'm currently not logged in, and I press enter, I'll be basically looking at the site as anybody else would, just a regular site. So that's the key difference there. So that means not everyone can just open up your module and make changes. That would be pretty bad. Great, so this is done. Now we're going to make a change to the image. So what I'm going to do is grab this image URL, so copy image address, and let's create an entry in the global for that. So let's go with img avatar. Now it's important to understand that I chose this prefix for a reason. The editor has certain keywords and prefixes that are reserved, and img underscore is one of them, where if you prefix the key with img underscore, this editor will know that the data type is an image, and then it'll give you an image selector, which will make it a lot easier to upload an image. So let's go ahead and grab this. I'm going to do images and profile. And let's go to the sidebar and find where that is. That would be right here. Okay, so we're going to do, so again, it's 3 because it's a URL. So we do global, and then img underscore avatar. And then that should reference this guy right here, and we're going to just put that in what was originally in place there. And now that this is inside the global JSON, once we deploy, we should be able to make a change. So don't forget to do turbo page global to update the global config, and then sudo turbo deploy. And basically all we've done with that change is we've added a new property in the global, which is going to give us an img avatar, which will then control this value right here. So once that deployment is done, we can go ahead and make the image update using that functionality rather than hard coding it inside the actual code, which is what we're trying to avoid. Okay, that's done. Let's reload this guy. And now it looks the same, right? Because we're using the same image, but now we do global and we have img avatar, and notice how it gives us this right off the bat, and we have a change option right here, and we can just grab one of these and change it. And the reason that it's automatically an image is because of this img prefix. So that's a reserved sort of prefix inside the JSON editor, this editor right here. So that also works for the page configuration. If you have an image here, you can do the same thing, and it'll automatically give you that image selector. So now I'm going to take this guy right here, and we can just, I'm going to just copy the image address. And then what I'm going to do, because I don't have any images on this, let's see here, I'm going to go to the end here and remove this. Now obviously what you can do is just grab your own image. What I'm doing here is I'm just going to create a quick image by taking a screenshot, because I don't have any images on this computer. Okay, and then what I can do now, I'm just going to reload this, and then global configuration, img avatar, and then change that by selecting upload file. And then on the desktop should be the screenshot I just took. And here it is. So give that a second to upload. And now here is the image I've selected, so I can do apply changes. And there you go. Now you may notice it's slightly skewed. That's because the image itself is not a perfect square. Let me just punch up the image right here. It's not a perfect square. It's actually slightly rectangular. So that could be a little bit problematic. And so there's an easy way to fix this. If I go to the sidebar mustache template, the image storing system here gives you parameters at the end of the URL that enable you to crop images. So if I do equals s and then let's say 120, that 120 stands for the dimension, the maximum dimension, 120 pixels. And if I do -c, what that means is the image will be cropped into a perfect square, which is going to be 120 by 120. So if I do that, it gives me a perfect square crop. So basically, I can guarantee that the image is a perfect square by doing equals S120C, like that. And that will take care of this minor nuisance right here. And this is very, very convenient because oftentimes whoever you're working with, maybe it's your client, will not know to use a perfect square image, and really that's a reasonable situation. So I'm going to deploy that change right now, and when the deployment goes up, this should show up as a perfect square. And you may have also noticed these icons returned. The reason that happened is because the global JSON in the actual source code has these set as defaulted to true. So when you do turbo page global, these default values go back into the actual deployment, the staging. So it's important to recognize when you sync up a page by doing turbo page global or turbo page home or anything like that, what's happening is that this JSON file will overwrite whatever's currently on staging. So it's important to remember if you made a lot of changes or anything like that. So let's go ahead and reload this. And now we have a perfect rectangular image with no skew. And that's the important thing. It's not skewed in any way. And I think that's a very convenient way to crop and skew your images. I'm sorry, crop and not skew your images. If you want to make it a little bit bigger, maybe we should do 140, and that'll give us a slightly larger image. And then now we can go back in here and go back to the global configuration. I'm going to remove one social media icon just because there's too many as it is. So I'm going to remove the LinkedIn one and then apply changes, and that'll give us a nice single row of social media icons. And now to top it off, the last thing I'm going to do is connect this guy right here so that it actually goes somewhere, it actually does something. So let's go ahead and head over to our home.mustache, which is where that email capture is. And let's scroll down to the bottom. What I'm going to do is we don't need this switcher anymore. Is I'm going to create an on-page script. Now bear in mind we have jQuery imported over here, so I'm going to make use of that by doing an inner function. Well, technically it's not an inner function, but it's a self-closed function. I'm going to run a console log just to make sure it's properly working. And then let's run the dev server. And I'm going to open the console. Make sure you're on localhost, and then open the console. And we have hello right here. And don't worry about this; it's fine on the actual staging. However, though, if you want to make sure about that, what we can do is we can go to the dev blog, grab the image URL, we can just grab the image URL. We want to remove this cropping function. It's actually a parameter. And then put that in the global JSON as the default value. That's really the last step of that process. And then we can reload and that'll show up. So now what we can do is we have this showing up properly right here. So I'm going to add an ID attribute to this input. We'll call it input email. So if we go to the top, so input email. And here's the button. And this will be ID button email subscribe. Okay, let's see here. Now I'm going to grab the button using the jQuery function right here. I'm going to bind a click handler, and then it's going to take an event, and we should prevent the event from firing off. And let's grab this console log and submit email. And let's see if that works first. So let's see if we grab that. Here we go, submit email. Whenever I click this button, that pops up. Might be a little bit too small, so I'll just bump it up a few points. Great, so this worked. Now what we want to do is create a subscriber JSON object, and the email will be whatever the value is from the input email subscribe input tag. So that will be input, I think it's just input email. Okay, so input email. We want to grab the value. And it's also a good idea to trim because users oftentimes will enter extra spaces all the time. So then we want to make sure that this is properly showing up. So let's try that. And there it is. So that was properly captured. And now what we want to do is basically send this to a backend. So how does that work? So what happens here is that every Turbo project has a CMS automatically, I'm sorry, every Vertex project has a CMS automatically connected to it. So if I go to my Vertex account and if I click on my sites, and this is the project we are currently working on. If I click on manage, you'll see that there's a CMS link right here, which I can then click on, and it gives us a data type selector right here, and one of those data types is post, and that's where the blogs come in, and that's what we use to set up our blog. Excuse me. So we're going to use the same CMS. However, you may notice that we don't have another option for email subscriber. So that may seem like a limiting factor, but however, it's actually pretty good that Vertex allows you to add your own custom options as well. And these are called resources on the back end, just like you would expect in a REST API. So what we need to do is create a new resource called subscriber. So I'm going to turn off the server, and we're going to create a new resource called subscriber. So we do turbo resource and then subscriber, and that'll add a new resource called subscriber. And the way you can check that is go to your models, and we see a subscriber model, which is basically an empty model with a few default configurations set up. And if you go to controllers, it'll give you a controller with some default CRUD operations. Now you can change all this, but these are the default configuration options, which makes it very easy to do all your CRUD stuff CRUD operations right away without doing too much of boilerplate code. And then on the index, all you have to remember to do is add this. So subscriber, otherwise it won't show up. And then export that subscriber. And now we've entered this new resource into the entire API. So what we can do now is go to the subscriber model right here and simply add whatever property we need, which in this case is just email. And this is not immutable. We want to make this change mutable. And there's the default value should be just empty string. And I'm going to add a Boolean property here called display is true, and this will make it so that we can see all the entries in the CMS. Basically, it'll show up here as using the email as the name that shows up in the CMS. So this is Vertex 360 specific. This key right here and these immutable keys. Everything else is pretty much standard Mongo and Mongoose ORM. So it's pretty close to Mongo and Mongoose. So now we have a subscriber resource plugged in. So if I go to my server and run localhost, I can do API subscriber, and it'll give me a valid response because the API and the resource and the controller was all successfully connected. So that was successful. So now we can go back to our home mustache, and over here we can, once this is ready to go, actually we should do a little bit of validation here. So if the subscriber email length if subscriber email length is 0, basically what's happening here is the user's pressing return without entering an email. Please enter your email. Okay, just very light validation. You should probably do a little bit more, like check to make sure the email itself is valid and whatnot, but I'm sure you can Google your way through that. And then what we're going to do here is make an AJAX call. And that needs a URL, a type. That's going to be post because we're sending data to the server. Data is the subscriber JSON. And success. I'm going to pass that in as null first, and error. And the success takes a function callback, and so does the error. And then this takes a response argument as well as a handful of others. So let's do this. Let's do alert. Thanks for subscribing. Okay, and remember that the endpoint should be /API/subscriber. So, which is the same endpoint as we were hitting here to test it, and that's all connected by default in the Vertex project. So we don't have to write all that boilerplate code over and over again. The only difference here is that we're sending a post instead of a get. So we should be creating entries in the server. We can test this locally, so it's probably a good idea to test it locally first. So test@gmail.com, and I'm going to open the console and then submit, and then thanks for subscribing. That's the confirmation callback, and then API subscriber, and here we go. So this is all on local, so keep that in mind. This is just a local run, and this is, as far as that goes, it was a successful local run. But now what we want to do is deploy it and make sure it works on the actual server as well. So we do sudo turbo deploy, and then once that goes up, we check on the staging deployment and to see if that works as well. Now, obviously, I didn't handle the error here, so there's a few more things you want to do for error handling, but those are things that I assume that you can kind of figure out on your own. Okay, so now we can test the staging deployment. I'm going to click out of there and test it on staging. This is a typo on the attribute. YouTube, yeah, don't worry about these. These are just errors from the YouTube embed here. So let's go ahead and dismiss that. And then let's enter our test account here. So let's do hello@gmail.com. Let's get rid of all that stuff. Thanks for subscribing. Press enter. And we have this over here, which is what we saw on local. Now, if we go back to our CMS editor and reload and click on CMS and drop down here, now we have a new entry called subscriber. And then we press that, and that should give us the subscriber that we just posted to the server. And then we can also make changes if we want. We can actually edit the subscriber, we can delete it, so forth and so on. So if somebody subscribes twice, we can just remove it, and that's pretty easy. So that's how the CMS works when you're adding your own custom resource, which is as easy as what we just did a few moments ago. And once we create our own custom resource, we can fill it out. We can actually update the schema and configure the schema as much as we want to. And then just don't forget to add it to the controller index file. That's the only part that's not done for you by default. You have to manually do that, but it does give you the controller right out of the box. So that's it. That's as far as I'm going to go on this tutorial. That pretty much completes this project. However, there's one more thing that I recommend you do on your own, which is there is an About Me page, which doesn't do anything right now because we didn't connect it. So if you actually open up the original template here, excuse me, you'll see an About page. I removed all the CSS and whatnot, but the About page is sort of a bio page for your portfolio, for you. So I would recommend you configure that using this route right here, About, and then it should show what the original template had here before I stripped out all the CSS. And then that'll give you a more full version of this blog, or you could also just easily remove it. It's all the same really. So if you want to remove these three and just have that, that's fine too. And this link right here also connects to the About page. So it's a good idea to hook that up. I would recommend it. But like I said, you can also just remove it if you want. It's all the same. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you gained a lot out of this tutorial. I'll be doing a lot more tutorials like this. And I hope you continue watching. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.